What's up, Barnhill family, and welcome back to your home for all things combat sports.
Yo.
So, guys, the time has come to predict the main event for UFC 312, the rematch, Dricus du Plessis versus Sean Strickland.
Oh, yeah.
We're going to break it down technically and give some insight as to what we think the keys to each man's victory are, and then ultimately make our predictions. So, Nick, let's get into the technical analysis first.
Let's do it.
And it's kind of interesting because we've already seen this fight before, right?
Yeah.
And it was extremely close. A lot of people thought Sean won. A lot of people thought Dricus won. Dricus ultimately got the decision, but it was a very close split decision, 3-2 on all judges' scorecards. Just two of them had it for DDP. So
Right.
I think the best way to have this particular discussion is to talk about what might be different, because we've already seen 25 minutes. So how do minutes 26 plus look?
Well, this fight's very interesting to me because I don't exactly know how it's going to go. Sure, we saw them fight for 25 minutes and it was ultra competitive. When I was watching it live, I had Sean winning. I went back and watched it again and can absolutely see the case for Dricus.
Yeah.
Dricus had the bigger moments of the fight. Sean, it was volume versus it was quantity versus quality.
Yeah.
Dricus was just throwing bigger shots, and he seemed, even though everybody talks about his gas tank kind of looking like it weathers and later in the rounds, he was still giving it 100% in the championship rounds against Strickland, and I think that's kind of what gave him the edge. Now, Strickland didn't do anything wrong. He went out there and did what he does best, looked really good doing it, and I don't see him changing his game plan much, but I think he's got to be a little bit more cautious with how he enters the range. Now, Sean's very hard to hit, even though he likes to use that modified Philly shell. He's still really good at rolling with punches and getting out of the way of stuff without compromising his body mechanics and just his stance and balance. He doesn't slip too big. He doesn't roll too big, and so that's not gonna. He's not going to be threatened by knees up the middle or kicks that are going to come up or go to the body. He's really a straight up and down fighter. He loves to stay in his orthodox stance and pepper you with boxing all night long. But he's also good at switching stances. Now, he doesn't move and switch stances quite like Israel Adesanya, like we saw him do last night, moving back and forth so much. What Sean does is he uses those teeps and the walking checks to close you down, to pressure you, and that prevents you from kicking. It puts him in punching range and opens up a lot of the things that he likes to use, which are mainly his hands. So those are the types of things that I see sticking out as the difference makers for Sean's game plan. Last time, he was trying to implement the push and the teep and had some success, but not near the success that we've seen him have it in other fights. So I think really it's all about when he decides to throw those kicks, when he decides to really put the pressure on. And then the biggest thing is watch out for the blitzes. Dricus is a very powerful, dominant fighter. I don't think strength-wise Sean Strickland is even close to the same level as Dricus. I think Dricus is a very, very strong 185er who's likely going to wind up at 205 before.
Where he would be a strong 205er as well.
I definitely think so. He comes in, so I don't know how he makes 185, but I think that when he comes in, he's so explosive and he hits so hard. Sean's got to not just rely on his defense and his head movement. He's got to use his feet. Use your legs, move laterally. Because when somebody blitzes, generally it's linear. They're going to come in one direction straight for you. And if you back up, you're either going to get caught up against the cage, you're going to get taken down, or you're going to wind up in a position where naturally everybody that backs up in a fight tends to get tall. And those are the types of scenarios that Dricus loves, because he loves to throw those big bombs, the heavy hooks, the long hooks, and even some odd kicks that wind up going pretty high. So Sean really does need to use his feet to get out of range rather than stay in the firefight, and only stay in the firefight when he knows he's willing to work sound defense and get into a sophisticated mental game of trading. Dricus definitely has the one-punch KO power to finish Sean. Sean doesn't have that. But I think accumulation can start to wear on Dricus. And even though it didn't happen last time, the ability for Sean to find his target so much on Dricus is what stands out to me. Because I feel like if he's able to study for another full camp, plus he has 25 minutes of experience with this guy, he's going to be able to know what he did right, what worked for him, and then what definitely didn't work for him. The only other thing I can say is it's likely going to go to decision if Sean wins, and it's likely going to go Dricus's way if it ends in a finish. The only issue I'll say, and this has nothing to do with the fighters, this is purely the judges. When he lost his belt, it was in Canada, and he's a vocal person, and he says that part of that was the reason. This fight's in Australia. I don't know how they see him down there, but I do feel like potentially Sean Strickland is such a polarizing figure that even though judges are not supposed to have a bias one way or the other, some are humans and they just can't help but have some sort of a bias. So I worry that if Dricus does go to the decision, that he can get his hand raised that way. We've seen him win a decision over Strickland, and I believe he has the KO power and the submission ability to finish the fight. Sean, he's not going to submit him. I don't think he can knock him out unless it's tons and tons of volume over about 4 or 5 rounds. Which leads me to decision. He's going to have to win a decision, which means he's going to have to win over all the fans, and that's going to be very hard, especially how we saw Dricus fight him in the last time because of those championship rounds. Like I said, I think Dricus is a great starter, and he's an explosive fighter, but he tends to gas. If he comes out there and does the same thing with Sean Strickland but doesn't gas in the later rounds and is able to keep his storm growing, it's going to be a very tough night for Sean Strickland.
Yeah, Sean Strickland, as you said, is very subtle movements. The way he slips and misses is very subtle. Yeah. And Dricus' striking can be classified as the exact polar opposite, which is like big dynamic movements, covering a lot of space, cumbersome. That's the way Dricus fights. And when you watch him fight, it's like, man, it doesn't even seem like he's doing some things right.
Right.
But at the end of the day, when what you do is effective, by default, it's right.
Right.
So what Dricus is doing is very technical and very good, even though it might not appear to it as we're watching. Right. So the thing that Sean needs to do, I think, is really attack that body.
Yeah.
Because when you have a very unpredictable, very awkward style fighter like Dricus, you never really know where their head's going to be and the way they're moving in and stuff like that.
Right.
But he's got a big old body. He's built like a cinder block.
Yes.
And so there's and he's very heavy. He plants his feet. So I think Sean can have a lot of success with those teep kicks, with those push kicks that he does, and then also with the traditional body kick. If he can use that, maybe he can thwart some of those offensive. And Dricus does really well in blitzes.
Yeah.
So how do you beat Dricus? You got to disrupt the blitzes.
Yeah.
How do you figure out how to stop him from coming in and landing that big power on you? You put something right back at him every time you time it and anticipate it. So for Sean to watch Dricus's feints and watch the way he's moving in the first couple of rounds, love what you said about the lateral movement too, because when you have a blitzing fighter, you just need to get out of the way of the storm. It's like Dricus is not a hurricane, he's a tornado. He's extremely destructive, but tornadoes are really only destructive in one path.
Right.
If you're in the house next to the tornado,
okay.
you're fine, and your neighbor's home is decimated. So just learn how to use that lateral movement, get out, reset, and then frustrate Dricus that way. Maybe you can catch him chasing and start to counter there.
Or I love to step off the angle when Dricus does come in and fire some leg kicks, because as we know, when somebody's blitzing, they're moving forward, which means their weight is in their front leg. Now, if they're stepping, the weight is always in the front leg, even though the leg happens to be changing. So if Sean notices that, picks up on the timing, and I agree with you, he does need to keep a jab in his face, but if he can make those adjustments, move laterally, and chop the leg as it's coming down to stand on these blitzes, he can get out of the way and still mount a little bit of offense. So that was just one little thing I wanted to add to your point.
Yeah, for sure. And guys, before we actually make our predictions and tell you who's going to win this fight, we noticed something alarming. Most of you that watch our videos are not subscribed to the channel.
You gotta be kidding me.
I wasn't expecting him to say that, guys, but you heard him. Please subscribe. It helps us out. We're trying to get to 10,000 subscribers, and your subscription to this channel means the world to us so that we can keep providing the best content we can for you. Now back to the prediction.
We love you long time.
So Nick, so basically for me, I'm going Dricus, and I'm going to tell you why. I think there's more paths to victory.
Okay.
Dricus, certainly, if we said this fight's going to end in a knockout, I don't think anybody would argue that was Dricus.
Yep.
If we said this fight's going to end as submission, I think even more people would probably say that's going to be Dricus.
Right.
And he's already proven to us that he can beat Sean in a decision, even if it is a controversial, close split decision.
Right.
So the three ways that you possibly can win, I mean, let's put DQ aside for a second, but the three very common ways that you can win a fight, Dricus has the ability to get his hand raised in all three.
Yeah.
Sean has one, which is the decision.
And he already lost one.
Right. And the precedent is just a year ago, he lost a decision to this same guy. So it's very difficult to go back and win a decision against a guy that you've already lost a decision to, especially when that guy has had 25 minutes to dissect your game.
Yeah.
And the other opponent that he's been in there with in the meantime was Israel Adesanya. So he had to prepare very appropriately and train very hard for that fight. So Dricus, I feel like he's dialed right now.
Yeah.
I feel like he's a champion who could hold his belt for a little while. You know, Khamzat is the X factor there. We don't know how that's going to shake out. But, I'm going Dricus du Plessis. I think his time is right now, even if Khamzat's time may come towards the end of the year. And that's yet to be determined, by the way. But not to digress from the point, Dricus du Plessis, but I do like him by finish this time.
Okay.
I like him by third round TKO. I think he's going to be able to... Actually, I'm sorry. Third round submission, but it comes from a knockdown.
Okay.
So I think Dricus is going to get a knockdown on Sean, and then he's going to be able to transition into a rear naked choke, and that's how I like Dricus winning the fight.
Okay, great call. And, a lot of times when we see people fight and there's not a whole lot of time between the rematches, not that much can change, right? Sean Strickland's not going to be a different fighter, and Dricus is not going to be a different fighter. And even when you have guys that do go into their camp and say, I fired everybody and I'm a different fighter now. We saw that with Deontay Wilder and Tyson Fury. He goes, I'm going to hit him one or two times and he's going to go right back to the old Deontay Wilder.
Yep.
That's exactly what happened. So these guys aren't going to change their game plan. They have confidence in their team and their abilities to work their game plan and prepare for each other. But yeah, this is one of those fights that's very interesting, and I think it's going to come down to the mentality. Dricus has shown us in only 7 or 8 fights in the UFC. He's not had that many fights. That he can rise to the occasion. He's got ice running through his veins, and no matter the magnitude of the fight, he can show up. Sean Strickland is also that way. He's very tough. He seems to be the kind of guy that's not emotionally charged or doesn't get wound up with emotions before fights or even during the fight. But the one thing that sticks out to me is I feel like he does feel he was robbed in the first one.
Yes.
And like I said, I don't have any saying on the judging or whatever. I think he does kind of put the blame on the judges and feel like he was treated poorly in that situation. So I'm worried about Sean Strickland's headspace when he comes into this cage. If he comes in going, if I don't finish this guy, they're gonna screw me, and he goes in.
He may very well think. I think that's a great point. I think he probably does think that.
Go undefeated, right?
Yeah.
Because Dricus, he's like, well, they like Dricus. He's the first South African champion. There's a whole lot of excuses that he could cake in that would, maybe cloud his mind leading up to this fight. I think he needs to forget all about that. Go out there and do the same thing you did in the first fight, just do a little bit more of it and get out of the way of some of Dricus's biggest shots, because like I said, he landed quality shots, but only a few in every round. Sean was landing quantity in every single round, but nothing really phased Dricus. Nothing really dropped him. Nothing really dazed him. So I think he does need to go in with the same game plan, but he's got to be mentally as sharp as he's ever been. I think if he goes in there knowing this is a fair fight, these are the 2 best 185ers in the world, and whoever performs better that night, gets their hand raised, leaves with the belt. That's the mentality he's got to go into the fight with. That's the mentality that got him the belt off of Israel's waist. And I believe if he goes out there and makes the right adjustments, he can win this fight. It's going to be hard because I see it going the same way you do. If he wins, it's going to go decision. I've picked against Dricus du Plessis every time he's fought in the UFC, and I've heard about it every single time.
No, you've never gotten ragged in the comments.
Once or twice. The South African fans, they are very happy with their first champion in the UFC, and I'm all for it. I hope they get a card down there soon. I won't be in attendance because it's just simply too far away, but I will say that I'm not going against Dricus du Plessis in this fight. Who knows what I'm going to say when he fights Khamzat Chimaev next, but he is fighting Khamzat Chimaev next. He's keeping his belt against Sean Strickland, and I'm siding with you. I think we see a finish. I think Dricus du Plessis goes out there, does just enough to rock Sean Strickland, And I'm going to go. Did you go third round?
Third round, but I said submission. So
Right.
down to submission.
I'm going to go fourth round TKO. He's going to catch him. He's going to drop him. Maybe it falls against the cage or something like that. And then it's a ground and pound sequence to get him out of there. Sean Strickland suffers another loss. Dricus du Plessis retains his belt. And we move on to the Khamzat Chimaev fight that everybody truly wants to see.
There we have it.